Okay, so here's the notes for 5.6. We are going to continue to use synthetic division to solve polynomial functions or equations and find all the zeros, okay, given a zero. So here, remember, another word for zeros means that we have x-intercepts, solutions, roots. Basically, we are finding where the graph for our polynomial would cross the x-axis or touch, depending. So remember we talked about multiplicity. Remember, if we have like an even amount or an even multiplicity, then we do a bounce, while if it's an odd multiplicity, we touch, okay? Now, we're going to also reference going back to the fundamental theorem of algebra. So basically what this said is whatever the degree of our polynomial is, that tells us how many solutions we're going to have. So remember, other words for solutions are zeros, roots, and x-intercepts, okay? So notice that our polynomial is in standard form, so let's determine the degree. Remember, to determine the degree of a polynomial in standard form, basically we just look at the highest or largest exponent. In this case, it's 3. So since our degree is 3, that means we should have 3 solutions once we use synthetic division to find all of them, okay? And we'll count to make sure. Now, the good thing is they have given you already one of the zeros, so already one of the solutions. We just have to find the other 2. So when given the 0, remember, we don't change the sign there. We actually use it when we put it in our box. And then we use the coefficients from a polynomial to complete our synthetic division here. So we start at an x cubed. Know that the coefficient there is a 1. So I have 1. Then I have -4 on my x squared. Okay. Then I have a -15. And then I have an 18. So I didn't have any missing terms, so I did not need to use 0 as a placeholder. So don't forget, whenever you have missing terms, always use 0 as a placeholder. Okay, now my first one I'm going to bring below the horizontal line here, okay? So that'll give me a 1. And then anything below this horizontal line, I'm going to multiply with the one that's in the box and bring it above the horizontal line. So 1 times 1 gives me 1. Remember, we're always doing vertical addition, so I do -4 plus 1 gives me -3. 1 times -3 gives me -3. I add those two together to give me -18. So definitely be careful. You can use a calculator just to double check your answers. And then 1 times -18, of course, gives me -18. And I add that, I get a 0. So whenever they are asking you to find all the real solutions, you should always get 0 as your remainder, okay? So make sure you have that down. So basically, you should always have 0 as the remainder when you're given a 0. So you might want to pause the video to write this down. So now afterwards, these are now going to be the coefficients of my new polynomial. So remember, we always go down 1 degree. So we started off as a cube. So we are going to now start off as a square. So we'll have our x squared, our x, and then our constant. Okay, so remember, the constant is the term without a variable. And so because we're finding the other zeros, we will have to set this equal to 0 to solve. So I have x squared minus 3x minus 18 equal to 0. Now, because we have a quadratic, remember all the different forms that we can solve. We can either factor, we could use completing the square, taking the square root of both sides, or quadratic formula. Now, you really probably don't want to use completing the square, as we've said before. We cannot actually use the square roots because we do have the middle term. So your other 2 options are either factoring or the quadratic formula. And for both of them, we have to make sure that our equation is set equal to 0. So let's see if we can factor this first. So I'm going to write down all the factors of 18, or all the numbers that multiply to 18. And we have 3 and 6. There we go. Okay, so now the 2 that will actually, if we added or subtract them, will give us -3 is the 3 and 6. So I'm going to create my 2 sets of parentheses. Okay, then I have x and 3, x and 6 Now, in order to get a -3, we do need to make sure the 6 is negative, and so this 3 will have to be positive. And then I set them equal to 0, so I do x plus 3 equals to 0. And same thing for my x minus 6. And then solve for the x, so I get x equals -3, x equals 6. Now remember, we should have 3 solutions, correct? Because our degree is 3. So I have 1, 2. Now don't forget the 0 they actually gave to us in the problem. It was 1. So I also have to list that. So this is my third 0. And we did this correctly there. Okay. Okay, make sure you watch the next part. We're just going to continue to use synthetic division to solve polynomial functions.